And we are back after the long weekend to discuss the Tigers are on a 3-game winning streak. Trajan Langdon is set to sign his new deal as the Pistons Pobo this week. What could be his first move? And the most impressive Lion in week 1 of OTAs. But hint, it is not Jamison Williams. Let's go.
There's the snap. Blitz comes. Mayfield back. Loads. Throws. Picked up by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Reggie Miller. And it's blocked again. What a block.
Lead pass in for Larkin. In space for Raymond. And he scores! Lucas Raymond!
Welcome to Detroit Sports Talk. I am your host, Bobby Buckets, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Be sure to like the show, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts on today's topics, and reach out to me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. We had some great playoff basketball games that finish up this weekend, and it's looking like we are going to have a Dallas Mavericks Boston Celtics finals. The Mavericks are a 5 seed out of the West. Celtics have been your top dog in the East the entire year. Both are up 3-0. The Mavs have won some close games, especially last night. The shot making by Luka, by Kyrie is just so tough. They're so tough to guard. They're coming up clutch and hitting some big time shots. And the tough part is when you try to guard them close. I know that Derek Lively went down. Hopefully he's good to go. It looks like he didn't have any neck issues. Maybe he's got a concussion. Hopefully not. But having Lively and Gafford down low as lob threats, I mean, they're just lobbing it to him so easily because Kyrie and Luka are just drawing so much attention. Those lobs are easily there. So Kyrie, Luka are really just built for playoff basketball. They're tough shot makers and they're hitting their shots, and that's why they're winning their close games. So we had some fun news there. We had some tough news out of the golf scene, and even if you saw an interview with old Pistons coach Stan Van Gundy. We had the Grayson Murray news from the PGA Tour, and then Stan Van Gundy came out and discussed his wife's death from this past year. So it's tough. It's tough that in moments like these is when you are reminded about how fragile life is, and it's unfortunate that it takes things like this to happen to remind you of that. So I saw a little speech given by Harry Higgs of the PGA Tour, who gave a speech just remembering Grayson Murray, and then actually gave a challenge to those listening. And I really liked what he said. And he said to honor Grayson and just everything that he had went through, along with people who have also gone through things similar to what Grayson went through, that each day, he said, you should say something nice to someone you love and say something nice to somebody you don't even know. So today I started off my day by telling Zeke how handsome he is. He is such a big, handsome boy. And then I said good morning to a couple people at the gym today. Just a nice, wholesome interaction with some strangers I didn't know. Made me feel good to say good morning. So that is your challenge for today from Harry Higgs, and every day try to keep it up the rest of the week. But let's go ahead and start discussing some Tigers play this weekend. So the first topic of today's show is discussing the Detroit Tigers. They are 3-0 in their last 3 games. They won Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On Friday, beat the Blue Jays 6-2. The Blue Jays didn't even score until they scored their 2 runs in the top of the 9th. Kenta moves to 2-1, and Cole Keith went yard for his first home run of his career. We move on to Saturday, and they won 2-1. Go figure that they get no offense on the day that Reese Olson pitches, but Reese finally gets his win. Reese moves to 1-5 on the year after getting a win when the Tigers only scored 2 runs, and those 2 runs are thanks to Kerry Carpenter, who had 2 RBIs. He was the only one to have those 2 RBIs to bring those runs in for Reese. Reese did really well. He pitched almost 7 scoreless innings. He was pulled in the 7th after giving up the 1 run that the team gave up on that night. So Spencer Torkelson, I will say, he got the day off on Saturday. He was an 0-19 slump and was hitting 135 the previous 10 games. And again, that was you got to have that perspective on Saturday, because when Sunday came along, it was a very different game for Torque. I think he might have went 3 of 5, but Sunday really was the game of the year so far for the Tigers. They scored 14 runs. That's the max number of runs that they have scored in any game this season. They won 14-11. There were runs that were scored in every inning except for the first. So if there was ever a ball game where you wanted action the entire game, this was for you. If you wanted no defense, straight offense, this was the game for you. Torkelson, he hit a bomb. That was his 4th of the year. Carson Kelly hit a bomb. That was his 2nd of the year. And Matt Vierling with 2 bombs that day, one of those being the 3-run walk-off homer that he hit in the bottom of the 9th to win the game. Just an absolute bonkers game, an absolute bonkers weekend for the Tigers. But frankly, after just how bad and how, Tigers Twitter was just so down on this team this past week. For them to have the weekend that they did, the vibe has completely changed around this team. People are excited to see if they can keep this up and continue. And frankly, if you got a guy like Colt Keith, let's give a shout out to Colt Keith right now. He's hitting .422 in his last 14 games and is hitting .362 in the month of May. So not only did he get his first career home run this weekend, the dude is swinging the bat. Just with an absurd batting average the last basically month or so of this season. So the Tigers have 2 games coming up. They have the day off today, but they've got 2 games coming up against the Pirates at home. And then they start a 4-game series for the long weekend in Boston. So we've got 6 games this week. How many games do you guys think out of their 6 the Tigers win? They are still currently 10 games behind, so they need as many of these games as possible. But 2 against the Pirates at home, 4 in Boston. Let me know what you guys think. How many games they win in this week? Let me know in the comments below or over on Twitter. The second topic of the day, we are moving on to the Detroit Pistons. The big news to end the week was that they finally, after 5 to 6 weeks of announcing that they were going to hire a president of basketball operations, they finally decided to hire that man, Trajan Langdon, coming over from the New Orleans Pelicans. So the expectation is that he signs at some point this week. I listened to James Edwards III's podcast on Patreon this morning. And so it sounds like we may have a pretty active week this week. He said he expects in the next 24 to 72 hours for there to be some big news. So it makes me wonder if Trajan's going to sign early this week. And from there, I think before he's even going to get announced as our president, he is already going to make decisions on Troy and Monty. Perhaps those decisions were already made in the interview process. Frankly, that could have happened. But he's got to sign his deal first before he can start making any decisions. So in the event that this is going to be a very busy week for the Pistons, it can only make me assume that Troy and Monty are going to be gone. So that's the way that I'm reading this. James makes it seem like Troy is gone no matter what, and that Monty is essentially interviewing for his job again. But the whole Monty situation, it's like you gave him so much money up front that I feel like he wouldn't care if he is fired because he's still going to keep all that money. That contract has been signed. You've agreed to giving him all of that money. So frankly, Monty is going to be a very rich man, whether he coaches this team or not. And does he even want to coach this team? I'm not totally sure. He hasn't coached a rebuilding team before. He has always coached a team of vets. Frankly, Chris Paul has been around there. He was in the Devin Booker Suns. He's always had vets around him as opposed to a rebuilding team. So frankly, I'm trying to read between the lines for James here, and I am getting the impression that James thinks both of them are gone. He it seems like he knew more than he was willing to give up. But frankly, with him saying it's going to be a very busy week, my guess is both of them are gone. But he actually had some exciting things to share about Trajan as well. And that Trajan, they really enjoyed that Trajan did a great job of portraying that he's not a know-it-all and he wants to bring people into the organization to complement his weaknesses. You know, he doesn't go with the lone wolf mentality, that he wants the product on the court to be as good as it can be. So I enjoy somebody who is emotionally aware enough to know their strengths and weaknesses and to not view that as a bad thing, but just to view that as a way of, in order for me to build the best product in our front office, I have to bring in people who can complement my weaknesses. So I enjoy that about Trajan. And also, James said he didn't really have a direct source to this or to prove this, but through word of mouth, a lot of those moves that happened in New Orleans could have been because of Trajan, specifically from player evaluation. So maybe from a drafting standpoint, given how well they have drafted their 3-and-D wings. And we discussed this previously on the show. It's hard to know because in New Orleans, they also have a president of basketball operations in David Griffin. So it's hard to know. You know, it's obviously a collaborative effort there, but which one was kind of making the decisions over there? And if Trajan had a bigger part in it than we realized, that can only be better for us. But basically, the way that I'm viewing this and with what has been reported, what's been reported is that Gores is willing to eat the rest of Monty's contract. So there's something like $60 million left on Monty's deal, maybe more. But if the reporting is already there, it's already out that Gores is willing to fire Monty and eat the rest of that contract. If I'm Trajan and you're giving me the keys to this entire front office, you're saying this is my team, I can build this team the way that I want to, I am going to bring in my own guys. I'm going to bring in a coach who aligns with the things that I align on, and I'm going to bring a GM for that same reason. So just because Troy has been here for a minute, just because Monty has this massive contract, I think that shouldn't have anything to do with whether or not you want them to stay. If Trajan views them as being able to do a good job moving forward and wants to keep him on this, keep either of them on the staff, so be it. But frankly, if the owner is telling me that he's willing to start fresh, to remove these guys from their tenure and bring in guys that align with what I want to do, that's what I'm going to do. I'm firing everybody. I'm bringing in my people who are going to look at things my way, that maybe have a more updated or a fresher perspective on things, a newer, more, I guess what I'm trying to say is a more analytical mindset, just kind of viewing the NBA for what it is now as opposed to what it was in the past. By shooting more threes, trying to get more shots at the rim or from the three-point line, and just kind of having that updated version of NBA play now, that kind of positionless basketball. So maybe that's more aligned with what Trajan wants to do. So personally, if I'm Trajan, I'm firing everybody and bringing in my own people, but be sure to stay tuned in the rest of this week. If it is going to be a very busy week for the Pistons, you know that we will be covering that news here. So be sure to stay tuned in. But let me know, what do you think? What kind of big news are we going to hear this week? Is Troy gone? Is Monty gone? Are they both gone? Let me know what you think in the comments below or over on Twitter. The final topic that we are going to discuss today is the Detroit Lions. They officially finished their first week of OTAs, and the media was let in to view some practices for the first time during this offseason, or I don't know if this is the new part of the season, whatever you would call it. But basically what I'm going to call it is hype season. So nobody is in pads. There's not real football being played right now, and it's really more of just a mental aspect. If you're a wide receiver, you're focusing on route running. If you're a corner, you're focusing on form. So nobody's getting hit. Nobody's playing real football right now. So it's officially hype season. Who is your team going to get hype about? Those newer players that have potential, maybe a newer player that has just joined the team. So we are going to go ahead and get overly excited about one Detroit Lion in particular. last week we discussed Dan Campbell's quotes about Jameson Williams, about how he is a man on a mission and about how they have been hyping him up. But it sounds like his route running has been a lot better. There was a report that he did drop a deep ball to end practice. That would have been the perfect way to end the day for him. But that he's already looking better on the field. But what I want to speak to is Jeremy Reisman of Pride of Detroit released an article just detailing the week of OTAs and then what he got to saw since he was there for that media portion. And so the biggest intrigue for him is actually coming on the opposite side of the ball and a man who is actually covering Jameson Williams. And so the most impressive player to him in this week one of OTAs is Carlton Davis. So he said that Carlton has made quite the first impression to him in Detroit and said that Detroit believes that they have traded for CB1. Could Carlton Davis be CB1 on the depth chart this year? And quoted, the stickiness and the physical nature of his coverage was apparent this week. Jeremy logged that there was only a single reception. Only a single reception was on Carlton Davis, and that was a short gain by Khalif Raymond. But he batted down a pass that was intended for St. Brown when he was guarding St. Brown. And when he was guarding J-Mo, he shut out J-Mo. J-Mo did not have a catch on Carlton Davis. So for a defense last year that had no way of stopping any wide receiver ones, I mean, gosh, you could even argue wide receiver twos when you're starting Cam Sutton and Kendall Vildor in the NFC Championship game. It was just a team that desperately needed a lockdown corner like Carlton Davis. So Dan Campbell was quoted as him kind of taking over one side of the field. Now, I don't know if he's going to be that good where quarterbacks aren't even looking to his side of the field where Carlton is at. But most of all, just the fact that you have a competitive guy who you could define as cornerback number one in your depth chart would be huge for Detroit's defense moving forward. And most of all, I think the overhaul of the defensive line when you're adding Marcus Davenport and DJ Reader going out to get those free agent vets to come in and make an impact on your defensive line, on top of bringing in two corners in Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson, along with drafting two guys. I just think the overhaul of the D-line room, the cornerback room this offseason is what I'm looking forward to hearing the most about this summer in terms of seeing which individual position rooms have improved the most. So what position room are you guys intrigued by the most? I would have to say the cornerback room is probably number one for me because there's so much intrigue in the unknown of the two guys that you drafted. What kind of impact are those guys going to make? You kind of already have an understanding of the guys who are already on the D-line for Detroit. You didn't really bring in anybody outside of Wingo for the defensive tackle room that maybe pushes Levi out the door this summer. But DJ Reader, Marcus Davenport, two vets on the inside, on the outside that can make a difference. So those two are at the top for me. But what position room for you guys are you most intrigued about for this summer? Let me know in the comments below or over on Twitter. And that is it for this episode of Detroit's Sports Talk. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Be sure to like today's show, subscribe to the channel, comment below to share your thoughts on today's topics, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. I hope you guys had a great long Memorial Day weekend. Thanks again for taking the time to tune in, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.